Hello everybody, can you hear me? Okay, so I know you just had a break, but I also know what time it is, so I hope this is going to be a little bit of an audience participation presentation. Quick though, because I know I've got a schedule. Okay, so on August 11th and 12th, 2017, white supremacists marched on the UVA lawn and planned a rally in downtown Charlottesville to protest the removal of Confederate statues. Protesters and counter-protesters of the Unite the Right rally clashed around the community all weekend, and before it was all over, 3 people were dead and dozens were badly injured. UVA library staff quickly began pondering how best to collect documentation related to the events. We started gathering tweets and collecting URLs for web archiving. Having learned some important lessons in previous high-profile events, we quickly formed a team of experts from across the library, and in collaboration with our law and health science library colleagues, to create a mechanism for individuals to deposit digital materials related to the events. And you can see the screenshot there. Because we learned so much from the experience, and because we realized that the UVA library, like almost every cultural institution, was not prepared to quickly and comprehensively respond to such an event, we applied for this grant from the Catalyst Fund. So part 1 of the grant was to conduct a survey to assess what the experiences, successes, and needs were in the cultural heritage community in the areas of emergency digital collecting. All right, so now the audience participation. How many of you have experienced an event that required a rapid response?
Hold your hands up. 5.
Okay, so that's pretty similar to what we found. We surveyed 78 libraries, archives, and museums, individuals, and cultural institutions, and we asked them 21 questions. So nearly 6 in 10 institutions responded also experienced a similar event. Okay, my next question. What kind of events have you all experienced? Natural disaster? Student movement? Social movement? Terrorism? Violence? And some sort of community event that gained regional or national attention. Here's a sense of how our respondents replied as well.
Can you just, I can't read the bottom axis. Pick anyone, the red one. Is that 30 or 40?
It is 30, that pinkish reddish one on the bottom.
Percent.
That's percent of the respondents.
Thanks.
And there was a wide variety of things in that other category. Okay, one of the other things I wanted to get a sense of was how prepared people felt to respond to such events. I know that even though this was our 3rd in the 10 years that I've been there, we were not nearly as prepared as we wanted to be. So, on a scale of 1 to 6, with 1 being the least prepared and 6 being the most prepared, raise your hand if you feel like you're at 1. 2. You can keep your hand up if you're at 1, just to sort of get a sense of where we are. 3, 4, 5, 6. Who feels like they're totally ready? Yeah, so, oops. The vast majority of folks indicated that they fell somewhere between 1 and 3 on that scale. Most felt unprepared to respond effectively and quickly. And of the 78 people who responded, only 1 institution felt that they were the most prepared. I think that's pretty significant. So why is that? You've got my word cloud there. It breaks down into things like technical barriers, infrastructural barriers, difficulty seeking permission or gaining trust, and lack of time, training, and tools. So how many of you could use the tools or the services that are listed up here? Raise your hand if you think that would be helpful. Okay, what else could you use besides what's listed up there? And this, you're actually probably maybe waiting for the room.
Thanks. We have community back here. So, Robert?
So this ball rolling, it'd be interesting to have some type of dial that would talk about escalation. So minimal alert, max alert, how concerned should either the recipient receiving it be or the person who's sending out the alert be.
So sort of a sense of what the threat level is to the community.
And it could be two ways. I mean, we had that goofy thing that right before elections, magically the threat level will go to red to cause a certain reaction. But I think that's a good example of just want to let you know something might be coming or the tsunami's here. You know, you've got 4 minutes.
So what I hear from you though is a sense, some sort of communication system to let people know that we might have to mobilize for a response. And okay, what else?
Okay, yeah, what else? What other things might be useful for you here?
Just names of people who've been through similar circumstances.
Okay.
And just a voice to reach out to.
Yeah, so I think that speaks to Nick's community as well. Names of people who've gone through something similar, organizations that have done this, lived through this. Yes. I will.
And one of the community survey questions asked about that, asked if they reached out to other members of the community and who they did. So you're just getting the very high level here. There were 21 questions we asked.
Okay, and you have a question for a comment?
I think one of the things that we could have used in our situation was some temporary large-scale storage. There were a lot of stuff associated with the event, you know, posters and shirts and banners and stuff.
So physical storage, digital storage is also something that lots of people talked about, is not having any place to put large, huge digital files or multiple photographers' donations of digital files in uncompressed raw formats, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So both, in this case, it's physical, yeah, but it
Well,
could be
I thought
digital
they're
as
digital.
well.
Right,
Yeah.
so yeah, both.
Yeah, absolutely. Other things that might be useful. What are ideas? Does this seem pretty comprehensive to you, all of you?
And one more. And
Look,
we'll be here.
it's Robert. Hold on.
You guys can
Hold
come
on.
up with stuff later.
Okay. Yeah, we can ask, we'll ask additional questions, but.
So I like you talk about having names of references, either people who've been through it. I think there's an educational component that might be there, that it either could be passive or proactive. So it's getting into flu season, here's a notice that pops up, you should read this just to be prepared. Or I read that earthquake in California, I wonder if there's any risk that I have, a risk assessment, in the area that I live in.
So training is definitely something that people feel like they did not have information about. I personally, I come from a disaster preparedness background. I'm the director of preservation, so we handle physical disasters in our stacks more than I'd like. That's sort of how we approached this response, and it's one of my goals, and Tom and I have talked about this a lot, is that a one-day training session, much like we do disaster preparedness, would be really useful. So, but also I can see little quick alerts, educational alerts for the rest of your institution. I can see how that would be helpful too.
Thank you.
So just building on that, I'm on the emergency management team for the university, and we just dealt with a large disaster actually regarding books, 51,000 books damaged from a water leak, the largest one that we've had in decades. But disaster preparedness is actually, for books and materials, has a certain level of predictability and known and quantitative effort that you can quantify. Emergency, as we talk about here, there's a lot of uncertainty. One of the things that we do on a regular basis are tabletop exercises. So capturing tabletop exercises that are being done by peers and using those as use cases for training could be something. So sharing tabletop exercise examples across the community could be very helpful for training purposes.
So Tom and I have actually created a tabletop exercise that we launched at ALA this year, and it's hanging out in our institutional repository, and I can give folks the link to that later. But yes, tabletop exercises are just one tool that I think are really essential to having people think through their level of preparedness and just thinking about the topic in general, because in the moment you do not have the time to sort of think through what you would do. Anything else?
Anyone else? Am I missing anyone?
So I hope you guys will continue to think about this. We have tons of data from our survey, but I also like to always sort of check out survey data with real conversations with folks, and so I hope you will come up to us and talk about your ideas. So this is phase one, was doing this survey and the data analysis, which is not entirely complete. Then for the phase two, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, who is really going to be the one who's going to lead our efforts to actually create some tools that we think will be helpful and easily applicable to cultural institutions of all sizes.
So yeah, I think all of the work that we're going to be doing going forward is going to address a lot of the needs that you all have. So next steps, like one of the first things we're going to do is, thanks, there's technology here. I'm a developer. One of the first things we're going to do is evaluate relevant tools, methods, resources for a variety of different ways. One is like whether they are technically like friendly to use, easy to deploy, cost, and if they are like tools and methods that can actually be useful in a response. Once we do that, we're going to develop a couple of different prototypes based on the kind of tools that we decide might be best for the community. We used Omeka and some of their plugins for the August 12th rally. We're in the process of developing like a plugin for that platform to do things like virus scanning on file upload. This is something that we had to consider before we launched a public-facing collections form in response to the August 12th rally, was trying to make sure that people didn't upload a virus to take down the site. So we're going to develop some stuff like that, themes, plugins that are appropriate for the kind of material that you're collecting, that could be modified for the community, appropriate for the community that you're working with. And then doing all that write-up documentation, guidelines, and otherwise help you all put stuff together.
And I always like to say that his bar for whether the documentation is good enough is whether I could actually launch it. So it's pretty low, that bar. Questions? Oh, I guess I have.
Questions, comments, additional thoughts? Back here, okay. That's fine, this is great, I'm glad you're engaged.
He's got all my questions for tomorrow too, so a team will muzzle me shortly. So we've talked casually about It Takes a Village, which was an IML's funded project to talk about how to look at programs from a governance standpoint, technology, resources, and community. Have you thought at this stage about what governance might be, what sustainability might be, the next steps, or is it too early in the thought process?
So Jeremy's already working with some other organizations who are working on things like this. So Documenting the Now, for example, is doing a lot of this work. I've had several conversations with the chair of the SAA task force on, who knows what that, emergency, I don't remember, emergency events.
Yeah.
And one of the things she noted was that when she went looking for examples of things, UVA was one of the few places who had examples out there. And, so trying to come up with additional examples. Some other things we've thought about are if you are in a situation where you don't have electricity or you can't get back into your office, are there ways that we can deploy a group of people who already know? Some of this stuff can be done from afar. Your colleagues on the West Coast could be collecting tweets if you're on the East Coast and not able to get into your office. So are there some, and I know that there's a COPWAM, I think, is a project in which that is a grant-funded project to sort of look at sort of assigning responsibility for collecting different things. So, people are like, oh, are you collecting the march on this or the march on that, and who's going to do that. So rather than lots of people collecting the same thing, sort of taking on different pieces. And so I think there's some networking in that way. I think there's some of the collection can happen, like I said, from afar. Perhaps an institution who has a larger infrastructure could agree to deploy something like an Omega instance for a community that maybe doesn't have the infrastructure, and then transfer that back to the community who is responsible for it when things are in better order. Like I mentioned before, coming up with day-long trainings. I sort of have it in my head, you have some information stuff in the morning, you introduce tools. My digital preservation librarian who did the lion's share of stuff, I should give credit to her in our response. You know, the tweets coming out of Charlottesville were just crazy, some of which were misspellings of the word Charlottesville. I mean, we had to, and I said to her, what can I do to help you? And she's like, well, do you have Python on your computer? And I'm like, no, I have an administrative laptop. Doesn't have Python. And she's like, you're of no use to me, right? It's always great for someone to say their boss, but she was right? And so she had to go find colleagues in the law library and the health sciences library who did already have Python on their computer. So having preemptively going in and putting those kinds of systems and tools on the computer so that in a crisis you're not having to try and do that. And then having tabletop exercises, go through, pick a topic and actually run through how you would respond as a group, sort of how I think that training would go. There's a variety of things I think we can build off of. Even at the UVA library, one of the things we talk about is the reason we responded so well to these events, and they're well is a relative term, but is because we had been through this enough before and had collected so ad hoc in previous instances that we gathered expertise from across the library and the university to really come together to work together to respond, you know, to get the metadata input, to get the preservation input, to get the folks who are used to doing development work, getting the user accessibility people in, getting the IT security pieces. Because we were all working together, we were able to come up with a product that was actually functional. It took us a long time. It took us 3 weeks, and that's way longer than it should have in an event. And we lost significant amounts of stuff. Because of that, you know, if we had been able to launch that in 4 or 5 days, I think we would have gotten some more stuff. But that idea, and that's just within our university. So if we can figure out ways that we can partner with other cultural institutions of various sizes to do some of this work, I think we're going to be able to collect a lot more comprehensively, and also give the people who are dealing with the emotional burden a break, because that's one of the things that I've talked about these events at many places, and none of us were prepared for the emotional response. We talk about that all the time in disaster preparedness, but there's a difference between your physical collections being damaged and your friends and colleagues dying. Like, there's a difference. And so if there are ways that we can take some of that burden off in the immediate aftermath of an emergency while still doing our jobs, I think that would be really helpful as well.
Thank you.